But those who protest for Hamas, you're protesting for sheer evil. There are a lot of misguided people out there who don't know the facts. You're talking to people who deliberately targeted civilians, who raped and murdered women, who beheaded men, who burnt babies alive, who kidnapped little babies and Holocaust survivors, you name it. These are the people that you're supporting.
That is Benjamin Netanyahu, who's doing a lot more interviews these days and over the weekend. And he puts himself out there, and every interview ends this way. Are you going to take responsibility for what happened? And a lot of people think his political career is over. The parliamentary system is not something we deal with, but it's something that could collapse their government. But right now, it's all about coming together. That's what I hear. But what does Douglas Murray know? He's in Tel Aviv right now, Fox News contributor, best-selling author, National Review Institute fellow. His new book is The War on the West. His latest book is The War on the West. Douglas, I hear you're in traffic in Tel Aviv. That would be a prime target for Hezbollah, who I understand is ratcheting up the rockets.
Yes, that's right. There's been more and more activity on the northern border in recent days, which is obviously causing a lot of alarm. Israel is currently fighting, obviously, a very intense house-to-house battle inside Gaza against Hamas. But, of course, all eyes are also on the northern border, where there has been, as I say, an increase in activity, some anti-tank artillery, some machine gun fire, as well as rockets. And, of course, that's a great concern to the Israeli government and the people of Israel, because Hezbollah has tens of thousands of rockets stored there.
They do. But there's a sense, too, I imagine, you tell me, that Hezbollah is only going to get stronger. And this country's at war, on a war footing right now. Is there any part of the Israel IDF that thinks to themselves, should we just get this over with now?
I'm sure there are, and there's obviously a wide variety of opinion. I think most people are grateful that the northern front hasn't opened up. And it's an interesting scenario because, of course, Iran has a great deal to do with the funding and arming of not just Hezbollah, but Hamas as well. It seems that they haven't, as it were, tried to come to Hamas's aid by making the situation harder for Israel by opening the northern front, but that's sort of quite commonplace for Iran's behavior, which is that the revolutionary government, both keeps proxies going and also sacrifices them as needs be.
How would you describe everything, Douglas? You've been to war zones. You were just in Ukraine a short time ago. You went and checked out the side of the invasion where the massacre took place. What could you tell our listeners?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that, as I wrote in the New York Post the other day, the world really still needs to know a lot more and to realize a lot more about the horror that unfolded on the morning of the 7th of October. It was a massacre, I think, unprecedented in recent history for its barbarism, for its scale, for the sheer sadistic glee that the Hamas terrorists took in the most atrocious acts of evil. And I think that because, as always happens in any war involving Israel, people move straight on to what will the Israeli response be. The world hasn't actually spent enough time, no one's had enough time to look at, uncover, and realize actually what happened that day, because it was a battalion-sized attack of terrorists on Israel that day, from sea, air, land. They went as deep into the country as they could, and I've both seen the sites of the massacres and spent part of today talking with survivors and also the families of people who were kidnapped by Hamas and were taken into Gaza. And that's a really, as you just heard from the Prime Minister's comments, so that's the scale of that is something that really would horrify people. I spoke earlier to a man who's almost in his entire family, including all the young children, were kidnapped and have been taken into Gaza. Nobody knows if they're alive, if they're well. I spoke to another young woman who not only had her cousin abducted, kidnapped, and taken into Gaza by Hamas, but also her grandmother, who's in her 80s, has serious health issues, can't even get to the bathroom on her own, And Hamas kidnapped her, and there's footage of them gleefully taking this 80-something-year-old woman on a golf cart and taking her into Gaza, and just so happy about doing so happy about violating and abducting and a helpless old woman. It really is something which I think, which it's enough to shock even those of us who think we can't be shocked that much.
How about the fact that among those things, and those are horrific, we find out that a 3-year-old American kid, 3 years old, whose parents were killed in front of him, is also there. So one of 9. And most of these people are, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. Take as much as you can. And we know more of the game plan. The game plan was to go deeper into Israel and kill more people in the most horrific way imaginable.
Well, Hamas's leaders have said that in recent days, which is if they get the chance, they plan to do this again and again and again. And that's why I think there's an extraordinary unity in Israel. Israel has obviously been a very divided country in recent times. Every country has divisions, as we all know. But when a country faces an atrocity like that, it really can come together. And Israel really has. And it's remarkable to see the young men and women and people of all ages doing whatever it is they can do to help their country and help their country win at this time.
Yes. This is a bigger question, Douglas. There's a big push now for a ceasefire, for a pause, to make sure there's too many civilian casualties. In fact, here is Emmanuel Macron, cut 1.
I think this is the only solution we have, this ceasefire, because it's impossible to explain. We want to fight against terrorism by killing innocent people. De facto, today, civilians are bombed. De facto, these babies, these ladies, these old people are bombed and killed.
Okay, that is true, but never the intention. Emmanuel Macron says it's time to pull back. Do you get any of that when you leave you've heard of that when you leave the country or read press from other nations, right? What is the right thing to do?
Well, what's very striking is that European leaders in particular, and American leaders to some extent, are being pressured to call for these ceasefires. And there has been the announcement of sort of 4-hour pauses, is what the Israeli government is saying. It seems that the Israeli government was pushed into this actually not by Macron, but by President Biden, and that they couldn't resist the political pressure which came from him to have these pauses. What's striking about it, of course, is that the Israelis are trying to move in and put a stranglehold on Hamas and the Gaza. And any ceasefire, any let-up of that is, of course, only going to help Hamas. Macron is an interesting case because, of course, he's saying this for domestic political reasons. Don't forget, not only have they had huge protests on the streets of Paris and other cities in support of the Palestinians in recent weeks, but also, of course, Macron banned protests, and yet they went ahead. So this is a very, very tense situation for France, as it is for America. This conflict in Israel, this attack on Israel by Hamas, has opened up serious fault lines in our own societies, in France, in Britain, in America, in campuses in America, on the streets of America. And as I've said since this conflict began, Israel can and should look after itself. But we in America and in other countries in the West have to look after ourselves as well, because the same hatred is in our midst.
Look at the size of these crowds and these protests for Hamas, for the Palestinians. Now, there's going to be a huge pro-Israeli rally in Washington, D.C. I hope it's a pushback. I hope a lot of these donors start advertising and getting the word out about who the bad guys are. But here's a bigger question, Douglas. Is it possible to win a war the way we used to win wars in World War II? Did we worry about civilians in Berlin? Did we worry about civilians in Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Will we attack first? Did we have a choice? We had to win. If you have to win a war, can you do it?
Israel is the only country in the world that is expected to give fuel and other necessities to its enemies in a war. There's huge international opprobrium for Israel not giving enough electricity supplies to Hamas. I don't know of another conflict in history in which people were expected to help their enemies to this extent. But the bigger question, the bigger picture on this, Brian, and I don't need to tell you this, but this might be interesting for some listeners, is that the atrocities in October were so appalling against Israel that it doesn't matter whether you're on the right or the left, pro-Netanyahu or anti-Netanyahu, the revulsion is so complete. And I mean, I just literally now was in the car back from a trauma hospital, a recovery unit, where I was speaking with a very hard interview to do, I have to say, with a father in one of the kibbutz, one of the communities near Gaza that was attacked. And he lost his wife and 14-year-old son who died beside him. And he said to me at the end of the interview, he said, I'm of the left. Lots of people in these kibbutz around Gaza are. They're peaceniks, they're pro-peace, peace activists, pro-Palestinian, and much more. He said, I'm of the left, but we cannot live with these people beside us. And I don't think there's a single person in Israel at this stage who thinks that they can. The status quo up to the beginning of October has been proven to be absolutely unlivable. And so something big will change. Israel, in my view, should be allowed to do what it needs to do to protect its citizenry. And I just hope that the rest of the civilized world, who's had little tastes of the terror that Israel had unleashed on it last month, stand behind Israel at this time of trial.
I hear you. It's just so good that you go there and you get a perspective. And the thing is, I think it was so important to point out, the people that they killed were the most sympathetic for the Palestinian cause and for Hamas. A lot of them were volunteers. These people that went to a concert were the least threatening to Hamas or a Palestinian in Israel. And they're the ones who were the initial victims. And then it went into the military and beyond. Douglas, I look forward to catching up with you when you come back.
I look forward to it too, Brian.
All right, thanks. Stay safe. 1-800. Calling us from traffic in Tel Aviv. How great is that?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.